So I apologise, I think the written agendas that you have in front doesn't quite have the description of what we're going to be covering today, because what we're going to be talking about is how you can accelerate digital transformation, not just drive it, how you can accelerate. I'm going to talk about and share some lessons with you from leading banks around the world and what they're doing to overcome some of the common barriers that I know many of you face as you embark upon this particular journey. For those of you that don't know Forrester, just quickly, we work with business and technology leaders to develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. And part of what we do is we actually collect data on 80% of the world's GDP consumers. That's an awful lot of data, which means we have an awful lot of insight into what actually happens, how they interact, particularly with banks and other firms, what their behaviours and attitudes are around technology and financial services firms. And the interesting thing is when we look at this and we look at some of the trends that have been happening in this data over the last 3 years, we're seeing a number of things. The first thing is we're seeing an increasing appetite by consumers in the willingness to experiment. So the willingness to experiment with new technologies and new devices and things like that. We're also seeing an increasing use, an increase and an uptick, this is globally by the way, in device usage, which of course won't surprise you either. I mean, the Internet of Things is here. For everyone that's in denial, it is literally going to change the world in the next 5 years. And anyone who's already struggling with how to get your head around the data you have on the customers, your mind's just going to explode with the volume of data that's going to be coming down the pipe because of all these different devices. The third thing we're seeing is a huge uptick in in consumers wanting a digital and physical integration, which is really interesting, particularly in financial services firms with all those lovely, emphasis with my Australian accent on lovely, silos, because I mean non-lovely silos, where this is digital and this is branch and this is, call centre. The point is, customers don't think like that. In fact, the word channel should be written on a piece of paper, scrunched up in a ball and thrown into the pit of the fiery hell. Why? Because customers don't think in channels. They just I want to get stuff done, right? And they walk into a branch and they've got their mobile phone with them. So experiences that use both works really well for them. Or as we know, they can now go to an ATM and get some cash out with their phone because that's with them. Like these channels, as we used to call them, it should be in past tense, is no longer siloed because people are interacting with them both and they expect that integration. The other thing we're seeing with the data is an increase in information savviness and an appetite for information. So your customers are not just looking and absorbing more information and expecting more information from you, they're also looking at it from other angles as well. And so they're coming to you much more knowledgeable and much more potentially qualified when they're looking to purchase products. And then the last trend that we're seeing, and these trends, by the way, across all industries, I'm trying to translate them into kind of banking for you here as I talk through. But the last one is self-efficacy. And what do I mean by that? Well, self-efficacy is, well, what's in it for me? And now it's not just millennials, it's all generations, it's what's in it for me. Because they're kind of sick to death of brands where it's all take, and all you're trying to do is flog me a product. So in terms of financial services, the what's in it for me, well, how are you adding value to me above and beyond your product? What are you doing to help me with what's important to me, which is growing my wealth or getting out of debt or whatever those goals are? The goal isn't to get a mortgage. The goal isn't to get a credit card. This is not how customers think. And many consumers have all sorts of financial problems that they have all sorts of emotions related to, be it shame or whatever. And very few firms actually go out of their way to help customers and show them what's in it for them above and beyond just trying to flog them another product. So we've got these changes happening with customers. We all know that expectations are changing, but of course, simple mathematics, as expectations rise, perceived value falls unless experiences improve. And in fact, we just finished at Forrester our recent round of our Customer Experience Index, where we do this globally. In the US, we look at around, I think it's about 286, 287 brands. In banking, we look at around 28 brands. And in the banking industry, the customer experience, so we actually go out and survey consumers on a number of different variables, and the experience is actually falling. And part of the reason we believe it's falling is because expectations are rising and firms just aren't keeping up. The other thing that we're seeing is a huge cluster of firms in the middle. So we've got some great breakaway firms like USAA and Navy Federal Credit Union, but take those out of the equation and everyone's clustered in the middle because it's a huge, huge lack of differentiation. So these new expectations that are happening, many firms and institutions aren't ready to meet these expectations. In fact, what's happening is, this slide used to say, incumbents are at risk of being disintermediated. You are being disintermediated. And the danger here is, and I will point out, every single one of you in this room, whether you realise it or not, is actually going out of business. It's very, very slow, but it's happening. And the reason why it's happening is other firms are coming in. And sure, they might not be able to come, let's take Amazon. Amazon doesn't need to become a bank. It's not going to become a bank. Instead, it's going to come in the middle of this and drive a wedge between you and your customers. What happens in your business if you lose that connection with customers? All you are is a product manufacturer. You're a commodity. You're basically the dumb pipes. The customer doesn't see you. They don't see your brand impact. Banking is becoming invisible. Payments are invisible. So much of what we do in the banking industry is becoming invisible to consumers. So what is your brand anymore? There's no differentiation in what you offer. It's kind of the same. It's all the same products. So all that leaves you, if you're losing the connection with customers, all you're left to do is competing on price.
When are you going to give us the bad news?
All you've left to compete on, you want to come and join me? We do that. On price and features. And if all your business is about price and features, goodbye. I mean, even Amazon, whoever Amazon chooses to partner with, which could very well be Chase because they've got a number of partnerships with them already, but if they go and offer a checking account, which we believe that's what they're trying to do now, they'll partner with someone, they'll just squeeze them out. They'll be the commodity in the background. And if they don't keep up with the price and everything that's going on, boom, we'll just replace them. And it won't matter to the consumer. And put your hands up if you would open a checking account with Amazon that gives you free Amazon Prime. Exactly. I'm actually signing up for that. As long as the mobile banking stuff is kind of okay, you know, that's fine. Why? Because I'm getting value above and beyond the product. And that's what's missing in this industry. Everything's product driven and features driven and price driven. And that is important, don't get me wrong. But that's table stakes. That's a right to play. If you want to win customer loyalty and you don't want to lose this connection with your customers to people like Amazon and Google and other platforms, in fact, PayPal is probably the biggest threat. If you don't want to lose that connection, then you need to get closer to your customers and you need to add value to them above and beyond the product. So digital disruptors, they actually have a different mindset and we can learn a lot from them when we think about digital transformation. So when it comes to digital, there's two sides. I'm actually going to go to 4 different sides in a minute, but the 2 key ones, digital customer experience and digital operational excellence. So disruptors think about, they obsess about meeting customer needs. And by the way, this obsession, this is not, and I hear this from a lot of banks. Every time I hear a bank say, we put the customer at the centre of everything we do, I'm literally just want to roll my eyes. Because they actually do, but you know what it is? The customer's at the centre and they're surrounded by the bank and all the bank's doing is, do you want this product, do you want this product, do you want this product, do you want this product? The poor customer feels suffocated. And that's the typical customer experience. So instead they obsess about meeting customer needs, and I'll talk a bit about customer obsession and what that really means in a moment. They delight customers with superior digital experiences. They capture and analyse data to offer better products and services, and they rely on low-cost referral marketing. Disruptors also innovate at speed. They use software to automate end-to-end processes. By the way, my Australian accent, I say processes. I notice in the US that many of you say processes, which I always have to laugh at in my head because most of the processes are not process with ease. They're not easy, they're hard. So I don't get why it's called processes. Sorry, little play on words there in the accents. But they actually do make it easy, these disruptors. They partner through digital ecosystems, so they don't go it alone. And they don't just partner in the delivery of stuff, they partner in things above and beyond the product. And they experiment with new business models. And so all of this is why they're getting close to the customer and you're going out of business. So you need to become a digital business. I'm going to talk about what that means. And in fact, Nigel spoke about this earlier today. And I know when he did, he talked about a number of things. And I'm going to touch on some of those themes and make it more relevant for you in financial services and banking and talk about what some of the leading firms are doing. So a digital business is a firm that continuously exploits digital technologies to do two things: to create new sources of value, and secondly, to increase operational agility. So there's two sides of that coin, right? There's the how do we add new value to the customers and add new value to the business, but also how do we set ourselves up behind the screen and with everything else that goes on behind that so that we've got the agility to move, because these customer expectations are changing and they're changing at a rapid rate, and technology is changing at a rapid rate. And if you don't have the agility in your operations to keep up with that, again, you're going to go out of business. At Forrester, we look at digital maturity, and this is a really simple way of putting it into three phases. We have a lot of firms we have a digital maturity assessment, and most firms end up in one of these three buckets. At the early stage, it's about bolt-on. So this is about having a mobile app. It's about having a website and a digital experience. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it's also about a chatbot because most chatbots are bolt-on. They are not integrated into the experience. They stand alone. And a lot of times they cause inferior experiences because they're not integrated into the experience that the customer wants with you. Instead, they're often built. Why? Well, then they don't have to call the call centre, and that saves us money, right? So it's this bolt-on phase is where we see the very, very, very early stages of disruption. And we'll be honest, most firms, particularly in financial services, are still down there. We do have some moving up into the next phase, which is transform. This is where you can start disrupting other businesses. Why? Because you're transforming your back office and your operations and the things behind the screen, and you're integrating it into the way you do business. And that's allowing you to deliver customer experiences that are far greater than just what you're doing on the screen. And then you move to disrupt, which of course disruptors have gone straight to. But there are some outlying firms that have moved into the disrupt phase because of what they're doing, because of the speed at which they're doing it, they're actually disrupting banking themselves. So what's in the way? Why are firms still stuck down this bolt-on phase, so many of them? And it's not just in financial services, it's in other industries. Well, our data tells us that it's not technology. In fact, it's a lack of skills, it's a lack of investment, and a lack of agility. And these are the key reasons why they're the biggest barriers to success in digital transformation and creating great experiences. So how are the leading banks overcoming some of these barriers? Like, what are they doing? How are they actually speeding up digital transformation? Almost everyone's on the journey now, which is great. A few years ago, I was up here telling people, gosh, you've got to get on this journey. I think everyone's on the journey, right? Is there anyone here who's not on the journey? Yeah, everyone's on the journey. But the challenge is it's just not going fast enough, right? It's just not happening quick enough. There's a couple of things that they do. The very first thing that they do, these ones that are transforming fast, is they address culture. Because driving a culture that is digital and customer obsessed is so important. But time and time again, when I talk to firms and they tell me what's stopping them getting things done, when you dig underneath it, it's culture, and they're not addressing culture. In fact, they're changing everything they can in the hope of trying to speed things up, when the one thing that's in their way and the one thing that can move them forward is culture. Why? Because culture's hard, right? It takes a long time to change. It's really difficult to identify. Because all culture is a set of behaviours and values. So how do you change people's behaviour? It's not just KPIs, by the way. There's a lot in that. But if we look at the firms that we've surveyed around the world, and these are firms that the customer's not at the centre of what they do, these are customer-obsessed businesses. They have a number of traits in common. My slides are in the wrong order, so let me talk through this first. A digital culture is critical to digital transformation because of the 4 rules of business. You may recall this morning Nigel talking about the 4 rules of business. I'm going to talk a bit about each of those in a moment too after I discuss culture. But every single one of those rules has a culture-related element that's critical. So if you want to deliver easy, effective and emotional customer experiences, you need a culture that fosters customer empathy and that values a deep understanding of customers' needs and ecosystems. And when I mean ecosystems, it's what goes on in their world above and beyond the product. So if somebody's taking out a mortgage, what else is going on around that? They're buying a house, they're moving, they're looking at realtors, they've got lawyers, there's a whole bunch of things happening. That's their ecosystem. Digital operations, if you want to focus operations on the things that customers value, then you need a culture that recognises and rewards digital experimentation and collaboration. You need a culture that embeds customer metrics into the scorecard of every employee. And you need to foster customer empathy and customer-led decision-making. In a digital ecosystem, so if you want to, which is the 3rd rule of business, you need to, if you want to build platforms and partnerships that accelerate at scale, then you need to promote internal and external collaboration. So if your organisation is not very good at collaborating internally, you've got probably no hope of collaborating externally. And this is what you need for the digital ecosystems. And the 4th one is digital innovation. So if you want to innovate at the intersection of experiences and operations, you need a culture that encourages speed instead of perfection, that has a tolerance for risk. You need to be willing to fail fast and learn from your failures, and you need to promote collaboration between customers and partners. So every one of these you will struggle with if you don't have the right cultural attributes, if you're not starting to address those. I mean, you don't need to wait to get them. The point is you need to keep chipping away at culture now. Don't wait, because it takes so long to change. And in fact, whose responsibility is culture? Everyone's, exactly. Who can change culture? Anyone and everyone. I work with a lot of organisations and a lot of firms that kind of say, yeah, we get it, but the CEO doesn't get it. We're never going to get this done. That's just an excuse. Every one of you in this room can do something tomorrow if you're back at, not back at the office tomorrow, Monday, with your teams that can start to drive culture change. There's something you can do next week with your peers. There's something you can do next quarter. There's always things that can be done to nudge that culture along and drive some of these things about customer empathy and collaboration and so on. And firms need to fix their culture gaps to become more digital. I realise this is a big slide. You might not get a chance to read all of this, but I'm sure you'll probably get a copy of these slides after the presentation. But there's a report that I wrote around fixing culture gaps, and I identify what I'm calling an analogue culture and then what a digital culture looks like. And it's very, very different. A digital culture is a little bit more aggressive. It's not defensive. So going after things, not defending it, and not sitting there going, well, we can't do it because of regulation. In fact, if you're saying you can't do something because of regulation, you've got a culture problem, because it's just an excuse, because there are many other firms with the same regulations or even heavier regulations that are doing this stuff, and they are transforming and innovating and creating amazing experiences. They're collaborative, so they have a customer focus, they're empathetic, they're insight and customer-driven decisions. They have rapid decision making. I hear a lot of firms going, it's just too slow, people can't make a decision. That's because the governance is wrong. You need a different type of governance. Still governance, but it's governance that enables things to move at speed, not the governance that most firms have in their organisation. You need accountability, autonomy and empowerment. You need an attitude to risk which is about succeeding fast and learning from failures. In fact, some of the leading firms, do you know what they do? They hold failure parties. Yep, where they get up and they give an award to whoever's had the biggest failure for the year. And throughout the organisation, talking to their teams, talking to their peers, they're constantly talking about failures. Why? Because a failure is a lesson learned. It's the old quote which, gosh, who knows if it's true. You hear these quotes from inventors and you think, well, did this ever happen? But it's the old quote from Thomas Edison, I learned 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb before I actually made one. Failure gets you closer to where you need to be because you've learnt something. It's very rare people can go from 0 to knocking it out of the park straight away. So failure is actually a good thing. In fact, if you don't like the word failure, use the word, what are the lessons we learned? How do we get closer to our goal from what happened? A couple of other things I'll just point out here. So accountability is a big thing, right? That often slows things down. Decisions by hierarchy and kind of committee. And so firms that are doing this stuff fast, they have a devolved accountability and they have autonomy. So they trust their people. And decisions are pushed down as far as they can, not pushed up. So there's a couple of different things there. And, you know, please, if you do get a chance when you look at the slides later, I do encourage you to look through this and maybe have a look at this and go, my gosh, where are our culture gaps? Because it's going to give you a good place to start to think about what do we need to move, what do we need to change. But what I want to focus on for a moment is some of this customer stuff around, you know, being customer obsessed and empathetic, being insight and making customer-driven decisions. So you need to develop a customer-obsessed DNA, and out of all the firms that we survey around the world, there's a number of traits that they have that is common. The first is they've actually moved from being customer-aware to being customer-led. And that shift is really important. There's a term in Japanese service culture called omotenashi. And omotenashi, think of it like a chess game, but it's thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. So they have such a deep empathy for their customers that omotenashi is not just having empathy for the customer, but having empathy to think 2 or 3 steps ahead. So cabin crew on Japan Airlines, when they're trained, if you are sitting down and you have your laptop open and you order a drink, they are trained to give you a lid on that drink. Why? Because they're thinking 2, 3 steps ahead. What happens if there's turbulence? What happens if that drink spills? There goes your laptop, right? In fact, I had an experience personally where I checked into a hotel in Amsterdam, which was run by a Japanese company. And I was on an overnight flight from New York, which is where I'm based now, despite the very thick, clearly like New York, Jersey accent, just kidding. And I landed, I knew I was going to land at like 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I said to the hotel, I called them ahead, I said, I'm going to be checking in really early, is that possible? Great, because I'm coming on an overnight flight. Just wanted to make sure that was the case. Awesome. I not only turn up on the hotel and they almost identify me when I walk in, and I've never been to this hotel before, clearly the only one with an Australian accent, give me my cards for the door. I go up to the room. The room has been turned down. The blinds have been drawn. The lights are dimmed in the bathroom and the bedroom. I've got the mat for my slippers by the bed. Everything's ready as if it would have been turned down the night before when I went to bed, because they knew that I was getting on an overnight flight. What do you want to do? You want to go and sleep. So, you know, that's what it's about. And it's about thinking and having great empathy for the customers so that you're building experiences to where they're going to be rather than just reacting to what's going on now. And that's what keeps you ahead of the game. An example of this is we have at USAA, they actually have a team organised around helping a customer find a home. How many of you have a mortgage division or a mortgage team? Yeah. Having a team that's about mortgages or a product mortgage team, that doesn't evoke the same even thought pattern, does it, as, wow, this is a team about helping a customer find a home. Even that language starts to change things to think more broadly about what's going on with the customer. Yeah, the mortgage is part of it, but there's so much else going on. And so it changes the game. I mean, no customer in the universe ever woke up in the morning going, oh my God, this is so exciting. Guess what? I've got to check my computer. I've got to check my computer. Quick. Why? Because I really want to know what mortgage rate my bank's going to offer me today. Like, no one does that, right? Seriously. Instead, it's, okay, the baby's due in 3 months. We've really got to move. Or it's, oh my God, that house we saw yesterday. I love it. We've really got to get a mortgage. We've got to get this. We can't let anyone else get it, right? That's what goes on in people's minds, not, I want a mortgage. And so this sort of stuff changes the game. And in fact, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but leading firms are starting to organise around the customer in this way. The second thing is moving from being data-rich to insights-driven. Big data is dead. And I'm probably one of the few people that will say that to you. The reason why it's dead is because it's useless if you don't know what to do with it. And that's what I find with a lot of firms. They're like, we've got this data, we just don't know what to do with it. And so the leading firms are actually insights-driven. They use data to drive insights, and they use those insights to drive decisions across the organisation. Not just on the front line, but everywhere in the organisation. And they do that by giving their employees a real-time 360-degree view of the customer. Not just the frontline people in the branch and the contact centre, but everybody. Because no matter whether you're building an offer document, you're building a product, you are in sales distribution or sales training or whatever it is, every single person in the organisation should be making data-driven decisions. And if you have a 360 view of your customer, it's not, well, here's what products they have, here's what they earn, here's their age and demographic. Well, that's not really going to help you, because it's not going to help you make an insight-driven decision. What's going to help you is understanding that, but also behaviours and sentiment and attitudes and context. That's what's going to help you. The third thing these leading firms do, they've gone from perfect to fast, which is very hard for financial services firms. I get it. I've spent most of my career inside large banks and large wealth management firms. So, you know, I completely understand this is not necessarily easy. But we are seeing this. Even a big bank like Lloyd's has cut the time from idea to production from 10 to 18 months. They're currently at about 4 to 6 months, and soon they're trying to get towards 1 month from idea to production. And we're seeing this increasingly. Even the large firms are starting to do this. This is all about speed. And they're doing it with a new design delivery process. So they start, typically there's 4 to 8 weeks, where they start by an understanding of the journey from the customer's perspective. The second then is they incubate the idea, which is about reimagining this experience and defining the plan of how they're going to get there. Then it takes about 2 to 6 months to potentially industrialise the solution and continue to evolve and improve it. And then finally, at the end, it's about 4 months to kind of prove the value to customers and optimise the solution so they can actually, you know, on a small scale. And then, of course, it's about rolling it out at big scale. And they've also embraced a new way of working. So idea generation, validation, and incubation, which happens in 6 weeks, comes from defining what's going on, what the service will be, not just the front end, but the back end, and how employers will be affected and all of that sort of stuff, and the processes. See, I can speak American and Australian. Hackathons, testing ideas, and building and validating the business case. Then they move to development and delivery. You know, 16 months of 2-week sprints, validating the design with customers, and the agile development and continuous integration. So this is what they're doing, and it's enabled them to start moving a lot faster. And the fourth one here is moving from siloed to connected. We already talked a little about being siloed. And I talked about the example of USAA moving towards being aligned around customer goals. Well, so is Lloyd's. In fact, what Lloyd's did is they identified a whole bunch of customer journeys that were really important and aligned with their business goals. Because remember, digitisation and a digital strategy, it's not something different to your firm's strategy. You're just digitising the business strategy, right? It's not something separate. What are you trying to achieve as a business? Then how do you digitise it? That's how you become a digital business. So what Lloyd's did is they identified these, they whittled it down to 10, but they're only starting with 2. And what they've done is they've formed these cross-functional teams. You can see some of the elements of these cross-functional teams here, to start bringing these journeys to life and start figuring out how can they add value to the customer or add value to the business, or how can they solve a customer problem. Scotiabank are doing the same. In fact, a lot of firms are with their digital factories and labs. In fact, Scotiabank have this, they started with rethinking mortgage onboarding. That was where they started. They just, one problem, mortgage onboarding, let's fix this. And they have a couple of different things. They have a full-time core, which they call the family. They have a mix of subject matter experts who kind of come in part-time or full-time, depending what's needed, and they're called friends. And then there's other stakeholders that come in on an ad hoc basis that they call neighbours. So there's people across the organisation that are constantly coming in and out of this digital lab, which not only creates great experiences out of the lab, but the learnings, particularly around design thinking, some of those other innovation techniques and co-creating with customers, some of those learnings get taken back into the organisation. So it's got a cultural benefit as well. In fact, collaborative methods are becoming mainstream. What we see in our data is that about 72% say that they're already temporarily assembling cross-functional teams for individual projects. I guess what I challenge you to do, because many of you probably already do that, is those projects should be around a customer goal, because that's what brings everyone together, from the IT through to the front of the house or wherever you are in the organisation. That is the common thread here. What is the customer goal? How can we add value to that customer? Or how can we solve a problem for that customer? And in fact, if you can't answer that question, what is the value you're trying to add to the customer, or what is the problem you're trying to solve for the customer, then you shouldn't be doing it. Embrace design thinking. And design thinking is a great way to start culture change, by the way. There are firms like IBM training everyone across the organisation, including developers, in design thinking. Why? Because it starts with customer empathy. So it changes the game. Instead of thinking technology first, gee, what can I do with it? Or thinking, here's this process, how do we fix it? Or how do we how do we make it more efficient? It starts with deep empathy of the customer and what's going on. And so firms are doing this, and they're also using this common framework and blending it with agile development. And this is across the organisation. In fact, this design thinking agile framework should not just live in the technology area or in the innovation lab. Leading firms, this is embedded throughout the organisation. They keep bringing people in. I mean, I sometimes hear from firms, oh my gosh, risk, legal, we can't get anything done. We build this stuff and then it just never gets out. Well, probably because you built it and then you went, hey, here, look at this, isn't this cool? Can we get it out now? Instead of saying, hey, come into the shed, come in under our wing. We're at day 0 right now, and we're currently trying to understand the customer a bit more so we can empathise with them and figure out what to do. And by getting them involved early and often through a process like design thinking, it helps them, because everybody wants to do great things for a customer, hand on heart, unless they're probably an evil person, but most people do. Generally, this is what they want to do. And so getting them aligned around this can really help move obstacles in the organisation. And of course, I'll let you have a read of this, but these are some of the techniques across that design thinking. Qualitative, quantitative research, personas, journey mapping, ethnographic research, voice of the customer, innovation management, all the way through to multivariate testing and things like that. So again, I'll leave this for you to have a look at when you go through. Just looking at the clock, where are we? Okay. So the first thing you can do to speed up your transformation is start looking at culture. Even though it might seem really, really hard, there are things that you can do. The second thing is focus on the 4 rules of business, right? Because a lot of people kind of go, oh my gosh, where do we start? Well, they start with something like, oh, well, would it be really good if we just digitise these processes? But of course, often that ends up being just automating the way things have already been done and have been done for however long they've been done, which doesn't help anybody. It just codes in potentially a bad process. So, instead, focus on these 4 rules of business and start chipping away at each of them. In fact, that's the firms that are bolt-on really just focus on this first one. As they move up the maturity curve, they're focusing on all 4, which is why you want to start working on all 4. So let's have a look at these quickly. I know you've seen them already from Nigel, but I want to show what some firms are doing in the context of banking to make it a little bit more, hopefully, relevant for you. So digital experience, this is about easy, effective, emotional experiences. And again, I mentioned our customer experience index that we recently released. What we find with banks, surprise, surprise, they do really well at ease and effectiveness. So things are easy, and yes, I can get stuff done. I can move my money, I can pay my bills, great. But are they emotional? No, they're not. In fact, I had an interesting conversation with a journalist from Forbes yesterday. He goes, how does a firm make a digital experience emotional? Very, very easily. Very rarely. I'm going to show you some of that. So here's an example of an experience that actually is easy and effective and emotional in a sense, because what it's doing is it's helping a customer towards a savings goal. So nationwide in the UK, they let customers transfer money into their savings account without even logging in. So this is pre-login screen. It's very similar to something here in the US that you may have seen. I don't know if it still exists, called Push the Pig. I think a bank from Ohio or Idaho or somewhere was doing it. So they've got the little piggy there, and the idea is that you log in and you can instantly just click to go impulse save. And it's really interesting, right? Because people have this whole psychological thing about saving and all that kind of stuff. It's like, well, what if I don't have enough cash flow? And there's all this guilt around it. But at that one moment, you're like, oh my God, I should be saving one. You just open it and go, done. It's done. It's just done, right? So it kind of gets that out of the way. Whereas by the time you log in and then you look at all the other things going on in your account, you might forget to do the saving, which is the important bit. It's kind of like culture, left till last, perhaps with saving for some people as well. But we can do better than this, actually. We can automate it. And this is what disruptors are doing. And in fact, there are many disruptors out there doing this, like Movin and Digit, but this is Nomi, which is a feature of Royal Bank of Canada, in Canada, their mobile app. So they've got this feature called Nomi, where they reduce the cognitive load and decision stress about saving and moving money by automating it. So what it does is it uses algorithms to kind of figure out what your spending typically is like and what sort of things are coming up. and your behaviours and also how you've interacted with this tool in the past to figure out when it can just kind of whittle a little, whittle some money away from you without you even noticing that it's happening. So it's kind of saving on the sly, I guess. So we're seeing a lot more of this. And so this is a great way to create great experiences. Talking about experiences and even thinking about emotional experiences, and this is one that doesn't necessarily require a whole bunch of digital transformation necessarily either in the back end. It's interesting. If I come to you as a customer and say, all right, I need something to do my day-to-day banking with, plus I'm also trying to save for a car and I'm also trying to save for a holiday, what would you offer me? Probably a checking or a savings account, right, or both? One checking, one savings? That's what we kind of have, right? That's checking or savings. Well, the problem with this is that is not how consumers think about their money. Now, I know the regulations tell you that's what the product's got to look like and all the rules, but this happens in every country in the world, and consumers do not think about their money that way. They think about it in buckets. I've got a bucket for this and a bucket for that. They think about it like this, right? This is their piggy bank. They think about, I've got college fees, I've got to pay off the mortgage. There's a nip tuck there, I don't know why that's there. Maybe it's because of those desserts. It's got saving for a sabbatical. It's got a trip around the world. People think of things in terms of, here's a bucket of like things I need to spend money on, like, rent or mortgage or whatever, and here's a bucket of things I'm saving for to spend on later. That's how consumers think about it. They don't think of it in terms of checking or saving. So if I come to you and I'm saving for 2 goals, and I want to separate them because I think of money in buckets, I've got to open a whole other savings account, don't I? Probably fill out a whole form, all that sort of stuff. Really frustrating. So this is an example from New Zealand. In fact, 2 banks in New Zealand do this, and they have been doing this, gosh, I saw this first 5 years ago, so I don't know how long it's been going on, probably longer. They're the same rules and regulations that you do here. But what they do is they let the customer choose what these buckets are called, and they don't put any barriers in the way. Now, I know it says add an account there, but literally as soon as I go click, it just says, what do you want to call it? Great. Do you want to add a photo? Sure. And I'm done. What's actually happening in the background, the way they've kind of done the operational thing to kind of fudge it, is when you open an account with them, you're opening 25 accounts. So as long as you've only got 25 buckets, you're fine. I mean, there's no fees on these accounts, so there's nothing kind of dodgy or horrible happening. But as soon as the customer clicks add the account, it's activating it, and they can call that bucket whatever they like. So here I've got my house stuff, I'm saving for a ski trip in Whistler. I've got is that a fun? I can't even read that. I think it's a fun bucket. So the point is, I can make this how I think about money, not how the legislative product world makes me think about money. And that makes things easy, effective, and emotional, because it's about the things I as a customer care about. Okay, the second rule of business is digital operations. So reconceiving products and capabilities in order to deliver better outcomes. So we all know the Quicken Loan story, and they certainly might have reinvented the mortgage, fast, digital, paperless. They've certainly put a rocket up all of the banks I talk to who are literally trying to build and copy this right now, and many of them have launched it. Traditional firms are fast catching up. Bank of America launched theirs a couple of weeks ago. And of course, you need to digitally transform the back office to make this possible. I mean, you're able to open an account within minutes because the underwriting is digitised, the experience is digitised. And the front end, by the way, at Bank of America does not look like your typical form with all these form fields. In fact, those form fields and digital have got to go away. It's just brochureware. You've just taken what was printed on a form and put it on a screen, which is not customer friendly at all. What they've done is the approach, it's not conversational as in AI chatbot, but it takes a conversational approach, the way it asks you questions and you're able to answer them with one button to move through the application process. So it's very customer friendly. In fact, in the future, most account applications are probably going to be done by conversational banking, as in verbal or text, with free form, just like I'm having a conversation with someone. Hey, what's your name? Hey, what would you like to do? Oh, you need a day-to-day. Great. How about a savings account? How much would you like to deposit? And so those. Oh, where have we gone? It's behind me. It's behind me. It's like surprise. There's a surprise monster in the behind you. Sorry, Monsters Inc. So. Now I've lost my train of thought with the monsters. Okay, so the point is that they're recreating this, and going forward, we won't be entering in form fields on our tiny phones, because it's just like we're texting a friend, or we'll just be talking to our phone or talking to our device. Commonwealth Bank has used data to completely reimagine products and experiences. So all the data that they have on businesses, they're feeding this back out to businesses as a product. So they're giving merchant insights. So that's helping merchants with their marketing campaigns and things like that. So they might know that, my street is really busy on the second Thursday of every month, but my sales are quiet. Wow, what's going on? And when they look into it, of course, it's payday for the consumers that are in that area. So they might then start putting offers in their window or doing offers to consumers at that particular time. And Bank of America, they've recently just launched this as well. So it's early days, but their AI bot, Erica, is proactively helping customers make smarter decisions. So again, what they're doing is they're reconfiguring their operations to turn this into new products that add value to a customer. And I was given the 5-minute warning about 1 minute ago, so that's why I'm speeding up. I apologise. Digital ecosystems is the third area. So, this really is a bit of a game changer. In fact, I would probably argue that moving from if you're in that transform phase through to disrupt phase, you've got to have these ecosystem plays or it just doesn't work, right? And this is about partnerships and platforms to create scale. And this requires you to think differently. You've got to think in processes and adjacencies to create value. So what I mean by that is you've got to think about your customer's context. Who influences your customer? What are their interests? What's their community? What are their goals? What's going on? Who do they interact with? What other firms do they interact with? What other products? And then you've got to figure out where you fit in all of that, because you're part of it. So what's your role? What comes before your part? What comes after your part? So back to my mortgage example in USAA, the mortgage is the bit in the middle in the green, that's their part, but what comes before it is actually finding the house. So they've partnered with realtors that specialise in helping military personnel, and they help people find homes and real estate agents and lawyers and all that kind of stuff that they need for that process. What comes after it? Well, moving house or renovating. And so again, they partner for those sorts of things as well. And so that's what's important to think of, because once you have that, you then need to figure out, all right, those bits you don't do, are you going to start doing them, or should you partner with someone? Or how do you deliver that? Because that's going to embed you deeper into your customer's ecosystem and deepen your relationship and loyalty with them. And there are many banks that do this. This is an example from a bank in Italy called Fido Bank. The whole bank is an ecosystem bank. They don't own anything, right? They have just partnered with the best of the best with startups across a whole bunch of different areas. I mean, there's some here for you. Payments, social lending, crowdfunding, social investments, cryptocurrencies, and they bring those services. As a customer, I think it's Fido Bank, and that is my experience, but here's what's gone on. They've got this ecosystem where they're bringing it all together for the customer. BBVA in Spain were probably one of the first to do this. They did this quite a while ago, so they've created their own ecosystem, and a lot of this ecosystem with partners and consumers and employers, but a lot of them are, very new startups and so on. So it's not your typical suppliers and vendors and things, but they actually are true partners, and they have, they were one of the first with an open API platform and going out there and allowing other firms to actually innovate off that, as well as enabling them to bring in partners very quickly as well. I'm going to click through this, just another example in small banking. Oh, I do want to stop on this for a sec. So, digital businesses are open businesses. They're open, they innovate with others. They don't just collaborate internally, they play well with others and they collaborate externally. And they let others innovate for them. Why do all the work? Why not let someone else do it, right? So what that means though is you have to reframe your business strategy. So traditional businesses go, okay, well what's the business we're in? Who are our customers? What channels do we reach them through? What partners can help us get reach through those channels? And then how can we kind of integrate to get efficiency? And that's a typical way firms think. Instead, you've got to change this around. You've got to start thinking about competencies. What are we uniquely good at? What are our unique assets? Ecosystems, you have to think about what ecosystems can benefit from what we do really well and our capabilities. Relationships, what relationships will allow us to enter those ecosystems? And connections, which capabilities do we connect to which relationships, right? What can they do for us, but what can they do with them? Remember, that's a partnership. Partnership is a two-way street, right? What value can you add to them and what value can they add to you? And then leverage. How do you continually optimise connections to win, serve and retain your customers? So it's a very different way of thinking about your business. Okay, I know I'm over time. I'm on the last one. Go back. Digital innovation. So this is about continuously improving and breaking through the digital frontier. And this is how disruption happens, right? You'll get so far with innovation, it'll help you do some of the other things, but if you're not doing all of these together, you will not be a disruptor, right? You might be a solid transformer. You probably need all of them to be a transformer, to transform your business, but you definitely need all of them to be a disruptor. So let's talk about innovation for a second. So, you know, there are a lot of firms doing this sort of thing, like AXA, who are working with startups worldwide as a part of its partnership for digital transformation, right? So they're creating labs and helping support the growth of these new businesses. Why? So that they can then perhaps buy the ideas and bring them into their firms or learn from them or whatever. So there's kind of this ecosystem. And then there's the play like BBVA, where they're partnering with some of these players as well. BBVA, there you go, 2014 was when they opened their arms with external collaboration with an open API. So they were one of the first banks to do that. But with innovation, you have to take a disciplined approach. Now, I would love to have time to spend a whole 45 minutes on innovation, but sadly I don't, so you're going to get like a 1 minute on innovation. You need to have a disciplined approach to innovation. And when we surveyed all sorts of innovators around the world in every industry, whether they were startups and new disruptors or whether they were existing firms doing it well, we found that they all had an innovation funnel. And it looked something like this. I mean, there are different variants of it, but it all had these common components. The first was idea generation, where they were generating, collecting ideas from employees, from customers, and from partners using social collaborator tools. And in fact, there are technologies that can help you do these as well. There's actually collaboration technologies. Then they evaluate the ideas. So they evaluate them based on a predetermined criteria. So they already have a criteria of what's going to get through the gate, and they determine what ideas are then going to get through the gate to be pursued. Incubation. This is the third stage. So once they identify what's through the gate, they then try and turn that idea into real innovation. This is where things like design thinking come into play. So they'll figure out, you know, how to nurture, develop, and refine that over time. So they'll continue to iterate that as well. And then all the way through to implementation. So it's bringing the idea from incubation to fruition and building a portfolio of innovations that drives value. And what do I mean by portfolio? Leading firms have a balanced innovation portfolio, and they manage it as a portfolio. So, you know, there'll be a team or a team of executives that look at the portfolio, and there might be a certain amount of money that's set aside for this every year. So you're not going through the same budget process or having to wait a whole year, but there's a pool of money for innovation and for a particular innovation portfolio. And the leading firms have a balance of innovations that will get them quick wins and incremental change, because that gets your momentum going and your culture change. There'll be sustained innovation, so things that you have to do, and these might be things a little deeper that take a little longer to do. So for example, if you're trying to do personalisation and things like that, you might need to have better data capabilities and data platforms and things like that, so they take a little bit longer. And then they'll also make sure they have some radical changes and radical things in there. So this is about testing and learning at the frontier of new technologies, so that, you know, they're testing it. And the idea about having a balanced portfolio is just why when you invest you have a balanced portfolio. It minimises your risk. So at the end of the day, I apologise for rushing through this, but at the end of the day, you know, we talk about digital transformation. Don't think of this as something separate. Like, there's far too many silos already in financial services firms and banks. Your digital strategy is not separate to your business strategy. If you're a bolt-on firm, it is, because it's probably your mobile strategy and whatever. Your digital strategy and how you digitally transform is your business. So your digital strategy is your business strategy. You take your business strategy and go, how do I digitise it? And at the end of the day, digital transformation is business transformation. It's not something separate. It's the same thing. Thank you.